Nobody could have predicted that a quiet exchange of emails, tucked away in private servers and long-forgotten inboxes, would one day ignite one of the most explosive confrontations between a former First Lady and a former president. Yet that is exactly what happened when whispers began to surface about correspondence between Melania Trump and Barack Obama, emails that, according to insiders, revealed more than just casual politeness. These hidden communications would soon be framed as the match that lit the fire of political controversy, throwing both figures into a spotlight neither expected but neither could escape. It all began when reporters stumbled across fragments of an email chain during an unrelated investigation. At first, the details were murky, just hints of private exchanges between two of the most recognizable names in American politics. The intrigue was immediate. Why would Melania Trump, the intensely private First Lady often seen but rarely heard, be corresponding with Barack Obama, the man her husband had spent years demonizing? What could they have possibly discussed that would now be described as game-changing? Those questions alone were enough to set Washington buzzing, but the answers proved to be even more shocking. For Melania, the revelation of the emails was not just about communication, it was about exposure. For years she had carefully managed her image, walking a fine line between dutiful First Lady and reluctant participant in the Trump political machine. The release of private emails with Obama threatened to break that balance. It suggested independence, a voice beyond her husband's shadow, a willingness to reach across political divides. To her critics, it was betrayal. To her supporters, it was proof she was more complex than the caricature of silent elegance often painted by the media. And to Donald Trump, it was nothing short of a political earthquake. Obama, on the other hand, approached the controversy with the calm demeanor he was known for. Publicly, he brushed off the initial reports, suggesting that any correspondence with Melania had been routine, polite, and harmless. But behind the scenes, his team understood the magnitude of perception. Even if the emails contained nothing incriminating, the very existence of private exchanges with the wife of his fiercest political adversary raised questions. What had been said? Why had it been kept quiet? And most importantly, what would the public make of it? In the world of politics, perception is power, and the perception here was electric. The media pounced. Headlines blared, Melania's secret emails with Obama, private correspondence shakes Washington. What did they say? Talk shows turned the controversy into a daily spectacle, inviting pundits to speculate wildly. Some painted a picture of Melania seeking advice from Obama on how to navigate public life. Others whispered about deeper secrets, suggesting political strategies traded in confidence. The lack of clarity only fueled the fire. Every commentator, every outlet, every blogger seemed to have their own theory, and the mystery kept the nation hooked. What made this moment so powerful was the contrast framing. On one side stood Melania Trump, a figure often portrayed as silent, detached, and secondary to her husband's brash persona. On the other stood Barack Obama, the eloquent, measured statesman who had long been cast as Donald Trump's opposite. The very idea of their private communication symbolized a bridge across two political worlds thought to be irreconcilable. And in that contrast, narratives exploded. Was Melania breaking free? Was Obama orchestrating something larger? Was this evidence of hidden truths the public was never supposed to see? The Trumps reacted predictably but dramatically. Donald Trump, furious at the notion that his wife had any connection with Obama, took to his platform to lash out. He dismissed the story as fake news, a smear campaign, a desperate attempt to undermine him. But his rants only drew more attention to the controversy. Every denial fueled speculation. Every insult gave new life to the questions. Melania, true to form, remained mostly silent. But her silence, in this case, was deafening. People interpreted it as calculated, as if she were withholding her own truth for a reason. Obama's allies, meanwhile, quietly celebrated. To them, the controversy revealed more about Trump's insecurities than about Obama's actions. They pointed out that private correspondence between public figures was hardly unusual, that nothing suggested scandal. Yet even they couldn't ignore the way the public consumed the story, not as routine communication, but as a revelation of hidden dynamics between two towering figures. In politics, the story isn't always about facts. It's about the narrative people choose to believe. And here, the narrative was that something significant had been uncovered, something that shifted the balance of power in ways not yet fully understood. The internet amplified the drama. Social media platforms lit up with hashtags like hashtag Melania emails, hashtag Obama connection, and hashtag hidden truths. Memes exploded, side-by-side images of Melania and Obama typing on laptops, captions about history's strangest pen pals, conspiracy threads diving into theories about what was said. YouTubers, podcasters, and influencers dissected every angle, each claiming to know the real story behind the emails. Some framed it as a human connection in a divided world. Others painted it as betrayal, manipulation, or even strategy. The truth became secondary to the spectacle. And that spectacle was precisely what made the emails so consequential. Even without their full content revealed, they changed the way people saw both Melania and Obama. She was no longer just the quiet first lady in her husband's shadow. She was suddenly a figure of mystery, independence, and potential defiance. He was no longer just the former president on the sidelines. He was suddenly an active player in a drama that still captivated the public. Together, their hidden correspondence became the symbol of political intrigue in an age where secrets rarely stay hidden for long. By the time the first wave of frenzy began to settle, the impact was undeniable. Congressional committees whispered about investigating. Journalists pressed harder, filing FOIA requests and demanding transparency. Partisans on both sides used the story as ammunition. Trump's critics pointing to the chaos it revealed within his own household, his supporters warning of deep state conspiracies involving Obama. The emails themselves remained mostly unseen, but their effect was everywhere, rippling through Washington like an earthquake whose aftershocks refused to fade. For Melania Trump, the emails became a defining chapter in her legacy. For Barack Obama, they became a reminder that, even out of office, his influence loomed large. And for the American public, they became a symbol of how fragile the boundary is between private correspondence and public controversy. The hidden emails had changed everything, not just because of what they contained, but because of what they represented. They weren't just words on a screen. They were a revelation of power, perception, and the unpredictable ways narratives can shape history. The uproar over the hidden emails didn't fade. It evolved. What began as whispers of private correspondence quickly snowballed into a cultural and political flashpoint. The mere idea of Melania Trump, a woman who often kept herself distant from the cutthroat political world her husband thrived in, engaging privately with Barack Obama was more than intriguing. It was explosive. And as the days passed, the speculation deepened. People wanted answers, and Washington knew it. At the heart of the storm was a single question. What exactly did those emails say? The mystery was irresistible. The public didn't need the full text to construct their own interpretations. Every leak, every fragment, every anonymous source added another layer to the puzzle. Some claimed Melania had reached out for advice on how to handle the suffocating spotlight of the White House. Others whispered about coded messages, political strategies, even warnings passed quietly from one insider to another. In an era where perception often mattered more than truth, the unknown content of the emails was more powerful than any actual words could have been. Contrast framed the narrative yet again. On one side, Donald Trump's world was a hurricane of noise, tweets, outbursts, accusations, all designed to dominate headlines. On the other side, Melania's world, usually silent, suddenly became deafening in its quiet intrigue. And hovering above it all was Obama, calm, deliberate, unshaken, yet very much in the center of a drama that no one could ignore. The emails transformed into a battlefield of narratives, with each camp trying to weaponize the mystery for their own gain. Trump's allies went into overdrive. Conservative commentators branded the revelations as proof of sabotage, insisting that Obama was meddling in Trump's presidency from behind the scenes. They painted a picture of Melania as an unwilling participant, manipulated into corresponding with her husband's greatest rival. Some even suggested the emails were fabrications planted by the so-called deep state to create chaos within the Trump household. The lack of evidence didn't matter. What mattered was feeding the base with a story they could rally around. On the other side, progressives and Trump critics seized on the story as proof of fissures within the Trump empire. They highlighted Melania's silence as a kind of rebellion, her decision to keep her correspondence hidden as evidence of independence from Donald's bombastic world. To them, the emails were symbolic proof that even within the walls of Trump Tower and the White House, not everyone bowed to Donald's narrative. The idea that Melania might have sought guidance or connection from Obama was more than gossip. It was poetic justice. But the emails were not just political, they were personal. Insiders described Donald Trump as furious, pacing, demanding answers from Melania in private. He was a man obsessed with loyalty, and the idea that his own wife might have communicated privately with the man he had built his political career tearing down was intolerable. Those close to the family claimed tensions in the Trump household reached a breaking point, with arguments spilling behind closed doors. The public saw none of this directly, but they felt it in the shifting dynamics. Melania, once the picture of quiet compliance, began to appear more distant, more deliberate, as if choosing silence over submission. Obama, meanwhile, stayed above the fray, or at least appeared to. His public statements were minimal, carefully crafted, designed not to inflame but to disarm. Yet the very act of staying calm only added to the contrast. While Trump raged, Obama's quiet composure made the story bigger, not smaller. People wondered, what did Obama know? Was he holding back? Why wasn't he denying the emails more forcefully? The more he brushed off the story, the more it grew. The press capitalized on every angle. News anchors dissected the controversy like it was a courtroom drama. Analysts spoke about power, betrayal, legacy. Opinion pieces framed the emails as everything from symbolic acts of rebellion to the potential seed of political scandal. Each headline was designed to keep the public glued to their screens. And it worked. Viewership spiked, online engagement skyrocketed, and the story became a cultural moment far beyond Washington. Perhaps the most fascinating twist was how ordinary people responded. For years, many Americans had viewed Melania as an accessory in Donald Trump's orbit, a silent partner, occasionally making headlines for her fashion or her distance, but rarely for her voice. The emails changed that. Suddenly, she was a central figure in one of the most intriguing political mysteries of the decade. Social media turned her into both a symbol of defiance and a target of suspicion. Hashtags like #FreeMelania resurfaced, this time with a sharper edge. Was she trying to break free through secret correspondence? Conspiracy theories blossomed. Some claimed the emails contained hidden codes, secret warnings about national security threats, private evidence of corruption, even personal confessions that would shake Washington to its core. Others wove elaborate tales of Melania acting as a whistleblower, secretly aligning with Obama to counter her husband's reckless behavior. These theories weren't supported by facts, but in the digital age, facts mattered less than virality. And viral was exactly what the story became. The narrative also tapped into deeper cultural anxieties. It wasn't just about two famous figures emailing in private. It was about trust, loyalty, and the fragility of perception in public life. Could a first lady be loyal to her husband while also corresponding with his rival? Could a former president maintain dignity while secretly communicating with the family of his successor's fiercest critic? The questions blurred the line between personal loyalty and political allegiance, and people projected their own values onto the story. By the second week of the frenzy, pressure mounted for the emails to be released in full. Activists demanded transparency. Journalists filed endless legal requests. Politicians called for hearings. Yet the content remained largely hidden, trickling out only in carefully managed leaks. This partial drip of information was intentional. It kept the story alive. Each new fragment reignited the debate, ensuring the controversy never truly died down. And as the mystery lingered, the political consequences deepened. Trump's poll numbers wavered, not dramatically, but enough to spark panic among his inner circle. Voters questioned his control, his household, even his grip on loyalty. Obama, though technically removed from the political stage, found himself thrust back into relevance, once again the foil to Trump's fury. And Melania, silent, enigmatic, central, became the wild card no one could predict. What made the emails unforgettable wasn't just the question of content. It was the way they symbolized hidden truths. They represented the secrets behind the polished podiums, the realities lurking beneath carefully staged photographs. They suggested that even in a world dominated by spectacle, the smallest, quietest acts, like sending an email, could reshape history. For Trump, they were a betrayal. For Obama, they were a reminder of lingering influence. For Melania, they were perhaps something deeper, a chance to be seen not just as a figure in the background, but as a woman navigating power in her own way. And for the American public, the emails were an irresistible story, one that blurred the lines between politics and drama, loyalty and rebellion, truth and perception. The longer the emails remained hidden, the more they changed everything. The storm surrounding the hidden emails had reached its peak. By now, the story wasn't just a headline. It was a saga that consumed dinner table conversations, cable news panels, and endless online debates. And yet, the central mystery remained. What exactly had Melania Trump and Barack Obama exchanged in those private correspondences? It was this lingering uncertainty that gave the story its lasting power. Without clarity, the imagination of the public filled in the gaps. Every silence, every refusal to disclose, every half-hearted denial only fueled the flames. The controversy became less about the emails themselves and more about what they represented. The power of secrecy, the danger of perception, and the cracks in political facades that few dared acknowledge. As pressure mounted, the speculation took on new life. Commentators began drawing parallels between this controversy and past political scandals, Watergate, the Clinton emails, even the Pentagon Papers. The comparison wasn't always fair, but it was effective. People wanted to believe they were witnessing history, another turning point where hidden truths would be dragged into the light. And framing the Melania Obama emails in that context gave the story a gravity it otherwise might not have held. For Melania, the scrutiny was unprecedented. She had spent much of her time in public life carefully minimizing her role, retreating into the background while Donald Trump dominated the stage. But now, whether she wanted it or not, she was at the center of the narrative. Each photograph of her, each public appearance, was dissected for clues. Was she nervous? Was she defiant? Was she hiding something? Her silence became louder than any speech could have been. It was as if the entire world leaned in, waiting for her to break the quiet. Obama, in contrast, seemed to thrive under the pressure. He spoke rarely, but when he did, his words were measured, deliberate, and open to interpretation. Supporters applauded his restraint, while critics accused him of hiding something bigger. But no matter how the pundits spun it, one thing was clear. Obama still commanded the stage, even from the sidelines. His involvement in the controversy was enough to remind people of his lingering influence, and in a way it seemed to elevate him above the noise. Donald Trump, however, could not escape the chaos. He raged on social media, in rallies, in interviews, desperate to reframe the story. To him, the narrative had to be about disloyalty, conspiracy, and sabotage. He painted Melania as a victim of manipulation, Obama as a schemer pulling invisible strings, and himself as the ultimate target of a deep state plot. But the more he spoke, the more he revealed. His anger, his desperation, his inability to control the story only made it grow. In trying to bury the controversy, he breathed new life into it. Behind closed doors, the Trump household reportedly cracked under the weight of the scandal. Insiders whispered about tense arguments, icy silences, and a widening gap between husband and wife. Melania, once dismissed as passive, now held a form of power she hadn't sought but couldn't escape. The emails, whether innocent or not, had become her symbol of autonomy. And in Donald's world, autonomy was indistinguishable from rebellion. Meanwhile, the public demand for answers intensified. Investigators probed deeper, journalists hunted leaks, and activists demanded transparency. Each new tidbit of information, real or rumored, shifted the conversation. One supposed leak hinted at discussions about media strategies. Another suggested personal reflections on life under the spotlight. None of it was conclusive, but every fragment was enough to reignite the debate. People no longer cared if the truth was messy or incomplete. They just wanted to know what had been hidden, and why. The cultural impact was undeniable. Late-night hosts turned the controversy into comedy, while documentaries and think pieces framed it as a reflection of modern politics. Social media split into camps. Those who believed the emails were a scandal of epic proportions, and those who saw them as a distraction from deeper issues. The debates weren't just about Melania or Obama anymore. They were about loyalty, secrecy, and the blurry line between public image and private reality. What made the controversy so gripping was its human element. At its core, this wasn't just about two famous names exchanging emails. It was about the vulnerability of trust, the fragility of image, and the weight of choices made in private that inevitably find their way into the public eye. Melania became a symbol for those trapped in circumstances beyond their control, while Obama became the symbol of calm in chaos. Trump, on the other hand, became the emblem of fury, fighting not just his enemies, but the very perception that he could be undermined from within his own home. As the weeks turned into months, the controversy refused to die. Each attempt to move past it was thwarted by new questions, new theories, and new revelations. In the end, it wasn't the content of the emails that mattered most. It was the perception they created. They represented a crack in the facade, a glimpse behind the curtain of power, a reminder that even the most powerful figures are vulnerable to the smallest of secrets. By the time the frenzy began to settle, the damage had been done. Trust had been shaken, alliances tested, and legacies reshaped. For Melania, the emails cemented her place in history, not as a silent figure in Donald's shadow, but as an enigmatic presence who carried secrets capable of rattling Washington. For Obama, they underscored his enduring influence, proof that even years out of office, his name alone could dominate the headlines. And for Donald Trump, they marked another chapter of chaos, another reminder that even in his own household, control was never absolute. The hidden emails had changed everything, not because of what they said, but because of what they represented. They were a mirror held up to the fragility of power, the unpredictability of politics, and the unshakable truth that secrets, no matter how small, never stay hidden forever. And as history would remember, the real revelation wasn't just in the emails themselves, but in the way they forced the world to question what lay beneath the polished surfaces of power. In that questioning, everything shifted.